Welcome, everybody, and so glad to see you all here today. Uh, this is an unusually intimate group because it feels like so many of us know one another, and that's really fun. But part of why we do this is to remind us all of the reality of being musicians, even though we're not playing, we're not hearing performances, but being together in a world of music making, I think is really a nourishing thing for all of us musicians. So I hope that today gives you a little boost. And we're heading towards springtime. That's going to be great. And meanwhile, I want to get right to, I do want to say if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will have an opportunity to have everybody be able to interact. But I want to get right to our conversation and welcome two really wonderful people, David Landis, who is a dear friend and is going to moderate and interview our special guest, Jake Heggie. And I think you guys are just going to have a wonderful time. So enjoy.
Thank you, Lolly. This is David. Nice to meet you all. For those of you that I don't know, and I see some returning faces, I just want to say one thing before we get started. I am thrilled to be associated with the Amateur Music Network because what Lolly has built, like through grit and perseverance during a pandemic, is nothing short of remarkable. It's really a platform to connect amateur musicians like myself with professionals like Jake Heggie. And, as someone who trained as a musician at Northwestern, I actually think Tony Marie might be coming, Tony Marie Montgomery, who was our former dean at Northwestern. It's nice to be able to stretch those muscles again. And I want to say it is an absolute thrill to introduce our guest today, who is a world-renowned composer, internationally performed, but also I consider a personal friend. We've known each other for a long time. And so I'd like to introduce Jake Heggie. Jake, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. See all your beautiful faces makes me very happy. I see some old friends that I wish I could have a conversation and a big coffee with all of you. It just feels like so long since we've all been in the room together, but I'm grateful to be in the Zoom with you if we can't be in the room. And I know we'll have many reunions, many happy reunions coming in the next few days. Also, amateur, I still think of myself as an amateur in a lot of ways because I'm constantly learning. I get to do things at this professional level, but we've all been there, and I think of myself that way every single day, so that when I go into the studio, I'm totally fresh and I'm ready to learn something new. It's I find it a very healthy perspective. Anyway, it's really nice to be with you all.
Thank you, Jake. So yeah. I'm going to dive in here. And, Jake began his career, like every other famous musician, as a public relations professional. And I have a photo. I don't know that I've showed you this in a while, Jake.
Oh, dear.
Remember this?
That's with Helena Park. Yeah.
That's with Helena Park. We're backstage at the San Francisco Opera. I think it was Otello, right? Because there's a big lion or something.
With the lion. Oh, yeah. No, yeah. That was probably in the scene shop. That was the season in 1995 when they had that lion in everything. They put the lion in everything. It was an entire season where Gerard Howland, maybe it was 94, Gerard Howland did the productions for almost every single opera. And it included that lion in Otello, in, I can't even remember. There were like 5 operas where the lion made this appearance. And it went on a big tour around the city. We did a big public relations event with it. It was painted gold, It was crazy.
I remember that. The opera has churned out a number of stars from their PR department. Besides you, some people on the call might know author Armistead Maupin, who started out in the PR department at the opera as well. So it's a long line of illustrious artists into Dead Man Walking, because it really is one of the pieces that you're best known for. And I read it's actually the most performed opera in the 21st century. Wow. That's
No, I wouldn't say it's the most. I think Puccini still wins,
oh,
but it's
okay.
it's had since its premiere, it's had 70 international productions. So it's probably the most performed recent American opera of the 21st century.
Okay.
In terms of new American operas. But yeah, I
So-
think Puccini and Verdi and Mozart still.
So what's interesting when I was reading about this is I didn't know the backstory with Lotfi Mansouri. So Lotfi Mansouri was the artistic director when you were in the PR department. And can you tell us that story of how Dead Man Walking came to be? And then I want to ask some follow-up questions because we have to hear about
Sure.
Allie.
Well, the first part of the story is before I got to San Francisco Opera, I had trained as a musician. Ellen Bacon is here, and her husband Ernst Bacon was my first composition teacher when we moved from Ohio to California in 1977, and I studied with him for 2 years. And I was determined to be a concert pianist at the time, but I was writing music. And then I went to UCLA. I went to Europe for 2 years and traveled all over Europe and studied in Paris. Then I went to UCLA. And so I was developing a career as a pianist and a composer. And I developed what's called a focal dystonia, where my hand started curling up into a ball when I would play. And this was I was about 27, 28 years old. And it got so bad that I actually had to stop performing.
Wow.
And that's when I had to figure out a way to support myself. And so
Was that hard for you?
oh, it was horrible. Oh yeah. I went into a very dark place, and I stopped composing because I lost my courage. And I tried to pretend, well, maybe I'm not a composer. Maybe I'm actually not a musician. I tried to quench that flame, that fire, that we all have. We all have a fire inside that's telling us what to do, that's giving us information and moving us forward. And music had always been my fire. And I thought, well, maybe I don't belong. Maybe I really don't belong, and I just need to find something else to do. Well, I found out that I could write really well about music. And I ran a private performing arts series for a while and learned about administration, and met writers and reporters and publicists and managers. And then I moved to the Bay Area and had a job at Cal Performances in Berkeley. And then a job opened up at San Francisco Opera. And I interviewed with then head of PR, Elena Park. And then I met Corey Lockhart, who produced the program book. And then I met with Lotfi, and I was making it step by step through. And then they hired me. And so I had moved to San Francisco, and then I got this great job at the San Francisco Opera, and I loved my job. And by this point, which it was early 1994, it had been almost 5 years since the thing with my hand, and I had gone through re-education therapy, basically having to go back to scales from, starting from zero. And the one thing my teacher told me is, you're never going to be able to play any of the music you played before again because of muscle memory. So all the Chopin and Beethoven and Schubert that I loved so much, I was never going to be able to play that again. But when I got to San Francisco Opera, not only did I make great friends like you and Elena and all the great people I was working with, I was immersed in this art form. Every single day was rehearsals and taking artists to interviews, writing about them, writing articles for the program book, for the magazine, sending press releases out, meeting all the local press, again, meeting all the publicists and journalists from all over the world this time, working with great international artists, and especially becoming friends with Frederica von Stade, with Flicka, who I had met when I ran the private performing arts series in LA, and then we reconnected because she was in that season doing Conrad Souza's Dangerous Liaisons that fall. And so we got to be good friends, and I started I was just really, really happy. I loved my job, and I loved what I did, and I was immersed in music again. I felt in the middle of it, even though I wasn't sort of participating in the way that I had thought. But then I started hearing these rehearsals, and these singers really inspired me. So I started writing songs for them. And the late Brian Asawa was also in the Bay Area, and I had gone to college with Brian. And so I wrote him a cycle. And then I wrote someone else a cycle, and I started writing for Flicka, and then Jenny Larmore and Renee Fleming, who didn't even have a recording contract at that time. I started writing for her, and they started singing them all over the world. And
Wow.
then I won a contest with my songs for G. Shermer. And the fact was, I had gotten enough away from academia that I wasn't writing to try to impress other composers or my teachers. I was writing to have fun and to write for my friends who were these great singers, and to give them something that made them happy to sing and felt empowered to sing. And Lotfi, the general director of the San Francisco Opera, unbeknownst to me, was paying attention to all of this. And at a party, very casually said to me, "So you're writing all these songs, all these great singers are doing them all over the place. Have you ever thought about writing an opera?" And I said, "No." I thought, I can't even imagine how you begin. I've heard them rehearsed, I've watched them. I have no idea how you would do that. And he said, "Well, we should talk about it." And the next day he called me into his office for a meeting and said, "So let's talk about your opera." I was like, wait a second. What? And I had my pad there ready to write the next press release or story or speech or something. And he said, "So I think you're a theater composer. I want to send you to New York to meet Terrence McNally. I've been trying to interest him in writing an opera for a long time. And we have an opening in the 2000-2001 season. And I think that would be a great place on the main stage for your first opera." And the whole time I was thinking, who are you talking to? But who was I to say no to that? So I went to New York and I met with Terrence McNally. And that was the beginning of what became Dead Man Walking. I mean, it was just kind of miraculous.
What was that first meeting with Terrence like? And what was Terrence like as a person? And how was it collaborating with him? Because, he's known for a lot of theater work, right?
Yeah, but he also, and he unfortunately passed away almost a year ago. He was one of the first casualties from COVID that hit me personally. But he was, first of all, he was a great man and so much fun and filled with passion and enthusiasm and a love for theater. And he loved opera and singers. Many of his plays feature opera. There's the Lisbon Traviata, there's Masterclass, which is right. Maria Callas. And, opera figures into almost all of his major works. And singers loved being with him too. And he was very funny. And so that first meeting, I was a little bit of a nervous wreck. It was 1990. It was 1995. No, it was 1996. I apologize. It was 96. And I had gone to be in New York because Renee Fleming was singing one of my pieces at Alice Tully Hall. So I thought, okay, I've got an in right now. And I met with Terrence, and he was in the process of finishing up the musical Ragtime, for which he wrote the book. And he was moving apartments, and he was surrounded by all of his LPs that he was packing up. And at that point, Lotfi, who was still my boss, had suggested an opera based on a French film by René Clair called Les Belles du Nuit, The Beauties of the Night, which was kind of a light comedy. And so I went to Terrence with this idea, and he was sort of just horrified. And he said, "Well, I have absolutely no interest in that idea. I do want to write an opera at some point." He goes, "But I don't think that's for me." Anyway, we did hit it off, and he was very nice. But I really did think that's probably going to be it. And then I wrote some more pieces for Flicka, and I sent one final recording and letter to Terrence. And he called me out of the blue, like a couple months after I had sent it, because I was resigned to the fact that this was probably not going to happen. He called me out of the blue. He said, "I just received your package. It got sent to the wrong address, and it was being held, and suddenly arrived." He goes, "And it arrived the day after he had gone to a Carnegie Hall concert to hear Renee Fleming sing American music. And her manager, Matthew Epstein, had been backstage and said to him, 'You need to write an opera, and it needs to be with Jake Heggie.'" And And then Renee ran over apparently and said, yes, you need to write an opera with Jake. And then he went home and the package that I had sent him was there. And so he called me and he goes, okay, I'm in. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And then he came to San Francisco and he said, I have 10 ideas for operas, but there's only one I really want to do, but I'm not going to tell you which one. Because we really have to both feel the same passion about the idea if we're going to devote years of our life to this. And so the first thing he said was Dead Man Walking. And I went, stop. I felt shivers. I felt this music. I didn't know what the music was, but I knew it was big emotionally, big enough for an opera house. I knew there was a chance for solos and ensembles and chorus. And I said, you can stop right there. And he goes, well, I did write all these ideas down. So let me read the whole list. He did. But I was so focused on Dead Man Walking by then that even after, I don't remember any of the other ideas he said because I was so focused on it. And that was the one he wanted to do too. And so that's when it took off. But he was lovely. And the fact that, I mean, I was totally unproven as a theater composer. You know, I was writing for singing actors, for opera singers, but I was completely unproven. But he took a huge leap of faith, just as Lotfi did, you know? So it was all these people who saw potential, which I think is why I'm so keen on helping to spot young talent and encourage it and try to be a mentor to young singers and composers and pianists and other people. Because it makes a huge difference, you know.
You mentioned that you're doing some of that right now in Chicago and in Texas also.
Mm-hmm.
And you're helping young composers kind of get to that next level. And is that gratifying work for you? Oh,
enormously. Just to, you know, everyone who has a career in some field, you know what it's like when you see someone talented come along who could benefit from your perspective. And I don't ever look at someone younger in the field as, you know, a student or anything. I look at them as a colleague. I just have more experience. You know, I've been around longer. I've been in the pool longer. I'm a little prunier, you know. They're new in the pool, and I can give them some advice about how you swim in this big pool, you know, and perspective. And so that is enormously gratifying. So I do that a lot. I've had incredible mentors, and I've been shown incredible kindness throughout my life and career. And to return that is incredibly gratifying as well, you know.
So just switching gears a little bit, mm-hmm. You really got your start by composing for singers, and there is, in your music, there is a love fest for singers, and it comes through because, Jake, I say this really very in a heartfelt way. I think yours is some of the most beautiful lyrical music that's being written today. And so I'm curious about how your relationship with singers like Flicka, like Susan Graham, like Renee Fleming, and also I read that, I didn't know this, you collaborated with Patti LuPone and Audra McDonald. So yeah. Talk a little bit about that collaboration.
Well, I've loved singers as long as I can remember. My sisters, I had two older sisters and a younger brother growing up, and they loved rock and roll and bands. But I was always interested in soloists and storytellers. Julie Andrews, my first goddess, of course. Oh, yeah. You know, Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. You know, yeah. A kid in the '60s. You know, and then all these great singers that would come along. And, you know, singers were part of popular culture back then. You know, Marilyn Horne would be on the Muppets, you know, and you'd see them constantly, and news features on the front page about a singer who was in town. You know, it was, and so those are the people that I grew up loving. I didn't know anything about opera growing up. I only knew about musicals, pop, and jazz, because my father was a big jazz fan. And, I don't remember when it happened, but probably in the late '60s, I first heard Barbra Streisand, and that voice and that talent just sort of, you know, blew my mind. And she was so funny, and she was so alive, and she was willing to try things. And so I wrote a lot. When I started writing music, I was around 11 or 12. My father committed suicide when I was 10. He had suffered lifelong from depression that they kept very hidden from us. So it was a huge surprise and shock. And I found empowerment and a community in music that I didn't find anywhere else. I was also happy to bury myself practicing the piano 6 hours a day and start composing anything I could do to be in that world and away from all the noise outside. I kind of feel that way even today, but I was very I wouldn't say I was a lonely kid, but I never felt alone because I had Beethoven and I had Schubert and I had Chopin and I had Debussy and I had Barbra Streisand and I had Julie Andrews and I had Carly Simon. So these composers and these singers were my mentors. Even if I didn't know them, I felt like I knew them. And they were my guiding lights. You know, my mom asked me at one point, because she was busy working and my sisters were, you know, it kind of, you know, there was emotional shrapnel everywhere after that suicide. And she said, well, who were your mentors back then? Who really helped you through? Because she couldn't be around very much. And I said, Beethoven and Schubert and Chopin and, you know, all the singers that I loved. They really were my guiding lights. And then I found other people who felt the same way. And this wonderful community of amateur musicians and professionals became my home. Anyway, so, but singing and singers featured central to that, and the piano. And that just stayed and grew. And it was in Europe and in Los Angeles that I first started hearing really great opera singers. And even in Paris, I went to the Palais Garnier, and the first opera I heard was The Marriage of Figaro, with a cast that included Kiri Te Kanawa and Federico von Stade.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, in like 1978, no, it would have been 79, sorry. And so then I heard Jesse Norman, and I heard Janet Baker, and I heard all these great singers and artists. Then I moved to LA and I heard all these great singers, Arlene Auger, Lucia Pop, and I heard, I saw Peter Grimes with John Vickers. And then I also saw the first national tour of Sweeney Todd with Angela Lansbury. And all those things were like, wow, the lyric stage, so much is possible. I still never thought I'd write for the lyric stage, but those performers really inspired me. And it was always this balance of musical theater and opera singers. And then I was lucky enough at UCLA, I became the page turner for a lot of the concerts at Royce Hall. So I turned pages for Leontine Price and for Kiri and Renata Scotto and Tatiana Troyanos and Isaac Stern and Itzhak Perlman. And it was kind of an amazing career, you know, that I was developing being a page turner and learning about these performers with them on the stage and just loving their courage, their bravery. I think I'm so inspired and awed by not only their technique, because they all had flawless technique that they could stand on like a rock, but it freed them up to do all these other things. But it still takes courage to walk onto that stage and trust this instrument to deliver. Then you add the element of theater and costumes and movement and conductor, and then your colleague doesn't remember their lines, you have to fill in, you know. So it went way, way back. And I just have had a love affair with singers ever since, and they're still some of my closest friends.
So when you're composing for a singer, do you compose for the voice or do you compose for the person?
Well, I mean, it's all of that, yes. And I have to know who I'm writing for. It's very hard for me to write something if someone says, I need a song for soprano. What does that mean? You know, what kind of, there's like 100 different kinds of sopranos, you know, and same thing with tenors and mezzos. So knowing who I'm writing for gives me clarity, because anytime you're asked to write a piece or given a commission, it's like this big blank canvas. So what you have to do is try to bring it into focus. And the more it comes into focus and the more you have clarity, then I can write something that feels very clear and specific to me. But because it's clear and specific to me, it can be many things to you. But if it's vague and undefined for me, it's going to be nothing for you, you know? And I don't say that I necessarily know, I know everything about every piece that I'm writing. I don't. I don't think any writer does. You just write. But the more you have clarity and it feels specific, then it can be very broad to other people, which is why, for example, an opera like Moby Dick or Dead Man Walking or whatever can have many different productions and many different visions and many different singers doing the roles and still work. Because we started with incredible clarity, but a kind of clarity that allowed freedom.
So tell me, as you're composing, you know, I think a lot of people think, what's a normal day like as a composer? Do you sit down, do you eat breakfast like the rest of us? Do you go hole yourself up with a piano for 10 hours a day? How does that all work?
I wish I had an easy answer for you. I do eat, yes.
Good. Eating
I tell
is
you,
good.
and sleep and coffee and silence are key to creativity for me. I can't do anything if I don't sleep well. So, I mean, being able to sleep well is really, really important. And then coffee, like all day, it makes me so happy. Even going to sleep at night, just thinking, oh, in the morning I get to have coffee makes me really, really happy. And then I usually just have like a light breakfast, but I have a studio about a mile from the house. This is the house. This is not where I actually work.
Where do you live? What neighborhood, and where is your studio?
I live on 21st Street in the Castro Noe Valley,
Okay.
Right on that hill.
Yeah.
And the studio is about a mile away in the Haight,
Okay.
and it's in a soundproof percussion studio in the garage level of an old Victorian, and I've rented it for about 16 years, and written a lot of music down there. And what's great is it's completely soundproof, so no one knows if I'm there or not. I can make as much noise or no noise as I want. Has a window to a beautiful little backyard. There are people around, but I hardly ever see them. And the people in the neighborhood, there's kind of a friendly anonymity. We say hello, but we don't really know each other, and I find that very helpful. And so I go there, and it's my place of blissful uncertainty, where I can go and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know something will happen. And so I just trust, and I try to go in there like it's playtime, and all the ideas are okay. In the end, some ideas will definitely be better than other ideas, but there are no bad ideas in the moment, and I still write everything by hand. So I just have my piano, my desk. I have a computer there, but I don't have any Wi-Fi. And I just write. And
you stay there all day?
Some days, no. I mean, some days, you know what it's like. Some days you're inspired, some days you're not. I find that moving, like walking, is really helpful to me to get my mind moving. And but then when I get there, some days I'm there 2 hours. Some days I'm there 6 or 7 hours. It just depends. And that's the hard part, of course, is creating and finding what are the notes. How does this go? And putting that down and getting the bare bones done. Orchestration for me is actually pretty easy now. So I can sit and orchestrate for 8 to 10 hours, and I don't actually have to be in my studio. I could do that anywhere. To compose, though, to actually write a piece, I have to be in my studio. I find I can't compose on the road. I can get ideas, like I'll sing into my phone. I sing into my phone a lot and record ideas, melodies, tunes, rhythms, different thoughts. But actually composing, I have to be in my studio. It's just the way it is.
So I also like to know about your personal life. You're married.
Yes.
Husband was a big star in Beach Blanket Babylon, which of course ran for years and years and years in San Francisco. What's it like having a partner in life who's also in the entertainment business? Is that hard? Is it easy? Is it?
Oh, it was great for us because he's in a totally different kind of field. He's a singer, but he's in sort of musical theater and acting. And so there's like no competition. There's only support and understanding. And what's interesting is that we've been together 22 years, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we got married in 2008. What's interesting is Beach Blanket closed just over a year ago. And so for 20 years of our relationship, he was really busy, every single night practically. And then when he wasn't doing that, he was busy with after school programs or other things. And I was traveling and writing and going to productions and playing recitals and doing residencies. And now all of a sudden we have time together, and it's been kind of amazing. And we get to have dinner together. We never got to have dinner, we would catch it here or there, and we get to, unfortunately now there's we haven't been able to join with friends, But now we actually have time when this is over to have dinner with friends. We do go on distanced walks with friends. We've been walking every day, like 2 hours,
That's great.
up to 6 miles all over the city. So it's been really, really great. And we have a son. Kurt had a son when I met him, who is 3 years old. And now he's 25 and he works at Salesforce.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he just got a promotion. And you
Oh.
know, I mean, hallelujah, we have a kid who's completely self-sufficient. How'd that happen?
I love that. I want to talk a little bit about, you've had a long history with the Houston Grand Opera, and I'm going to shout out to Judith Koenig, who I see on my screen there. Judith and I go way back to when she was at the Philadelphia Orchestra before Houston. How did that partnership with the Houston Grand Opera start, and why Texas? You know, I mean, it makes sense in San Francisco because you were here and all of that, but how did that come to be?
Well, Patrick Summers. When
Mm,
I was first at the San Francisco Opera in 1994, Patrick was involved with the music, the Opera Center, and the Maryland program, and he was conducting all the time, and we became great friends. And then he got the position at the Houston Grand Opera as music director, and he introduced me to David Gockley because after he conducted the premiere of Dead Man Walking, and he wanted my second opera to be with him in Houston. And so Patrick has led the premieres of almost all my major operas, except for If I Were You at the Maryland program. He's conducted the premieres of all my major operas, and they are now almost 10. I'm writing my 10th opera right now, and he's going to conduct that one. So that's how the relationship started. It was because of him. And then David Gockley welcomed me in, and then it just became sort of a second home. And Houston had a long history of commissioning new work that David Gockley created there. You know, he and Carlisle Floyd joined forces in the 70s. And by the time David left, not only did it have one of the premier young artist programs, but David had commissioned, I think, 35 new operas during his tenure there, which is extraordinary.
yeah.
And so I was brought into that fold, and I met lots of great people and great friends. So it was like San Francisco and then Houston, and then Dallas asked me to write 2 different operas, Moby Dick and Great Scott. And, you know, that's sort of been my lifeline, those 3 companies, you know, and then all these great artists all over the world. But it actually feels really, really good. And part of it is I feel very welcome, and I know those people and they embrace my music. They're willing to give me a chance to explore. Because the thing I worry about most as a composer is just repeating myself. I don't want to do that. I want to always be pushing myself, pushing the boundaries and testing so that I'm always learning. So that, you know, like there's Dead Man Walking, then there was The End of the Affair and 3 Decembers, and then Moby Dick, and then It's a Wonderful Life, and If I Were You, and then, you know, these smaller operas, including one with Patti LuPone for Philharmonia Baroque, you know, for a Baroque orchestra with a Broadway star. You know, I mean, I just like constantly trying things, but I'm so lucky that I've always found colleagues who are willing to go there with me, because I had this idea about wanting to push myself, and, you know, maybe something magical could happen. So.
Can you talk a little bit about It's a Wonderful Life? It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and husband's too. He loved it. And, you know, I love that quote, "No one is a failure who has friends." And Judith, I think you were there at the opera when it premiered, right? So, so you two know each other from there, I presume, right?
Yeah, it was the hardest project I've ever been involved with. It was more challenging than Moby Dick, because whereas Moby Dick is a book, Dead Man Walking has a book, these other things have sources that are literary sources. This only exists as an iconic movie with these visuals and these, you know, and the magic of what the camera can do to tell a story. So I knew I wanted to do it. Houston had invited me to write a Christmas opera, and they suggested a couple of things that didn't really resonate with me. And I thought, well, what's a story that people go to every year, that we watch at the holidays, that is essentially operatic? And I thought, It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, the guy is going to take his life on Christmas Eve. and which is very operatic and very dark. And it's one of the reasons the movie actually didn't do that well at first, because it was so dark. But I thought, well, maybe we can find a way to do it on the stage. And so they said yes. And I work all the time now with Gene Shear, who's my great writing partner and friend. And we decided we'd give it a shot. And so we were working it out in Houston, and it was very, very challenging. We had a lot of disagreements about how this would look and how it would work. And this is the way it is when you create something that big for the stage, is you don't really know what it is until it's being performed in front of an audience, because we fall in love with our work. There's that problem. And then you lose perspective. And so we learned a lot at the opening. It was really good, but we knew we had a lot of work to do. Part of that was cutting an entire character from the opera, the character of the pharmacist, Mr. Gower. It was just blocking the flow of the opera. And rewriting and expanding some arias and a new duet for the Angel and for Mary Bailey, and expanding Mary's role so that it felt more substantial. Again, all these things that you learn when you watch. And we had a chance to try it out again at Indiana University, where those musical changes all really worked, but then the set was still holding us back. It was not working yet. And so they agreed to redo all these elements of the set, and it arrived at San Francisco in 2018. And it was magical. It really worked so well. And it was just thrilling. But these operas, they're a heavy lift.
Yeah, they are. We have a few minutes left before we're going to open it up to questions too from the audience, but I'm curious about some of the things you're doing now. John Fink, who's on the call, sent me the CD of Violins of Hope. Oh yeah, you want to show everybody? Yeah.
Sure.
So maybe you can talk about that. I'd also like to hear about the 3 Decembers that's streaming live. Mm-hmm. It's Opera San Jose that's doing that, right?
Yes, but Violins of Hope, this was a special project that Patricia Christoph Moy at Cole Mansion, I think Patricia's here, Patricia, that she had, it was her brainchild. She called me and told me about the Violins of Hope, which is—
And can you explain that? Because I'm not sure everyone knows.
It's a collection of violins that were played by Jews during the Holocaust, that have been restored by this father and son team, Avshi and Amnon Weinstein, in Tel Aviv over the past few decades. And the collection travels around and plays concerts. It had never been to the West Coast. And Patricia wanted to bring it to the West Coast, and also asked me to create a new piece that would be a centerpiece for the residency. And so this happened, all just a little over a year ago. And thank goodness, before the pandemic. And she brought this collection, that 60 plus instruments, lectures. It was a Bay Area wide thing, and John was the publicist for it. It was really remarkable. And so I wrote this piece with my wonderful writing partner, Gene Shear, that included Daniel Hope, great solo violinist, a string quartet of friends from the San Francisco Opera Orchestra, Kay Stern, Don Harms, Patty Heller, and Amy Milland, and wonderful Sasha Cook, a great mezzo-soprano. And I'm a theater guy, so I have to think theatrically. It's like there's all these elements. How are we going to tell these stories about these instruments? And we had the idea that the solo violinist, Daniel Hope, would be the violinist that's being talked about, but that Sasha could actually be the voice of the violin that went through this experience, that has had many experiences through her life, but at this point is telling this story about being in those hands, and that person that took care of her in that time, and can sing because of being restored and brought to life. So it was a way to tell the actual stories, and it turned out to be a really beautiful, meaningful piece that I think will have a big life. The Cabrillo Festival has commissioned an orchestration of it. And there's a lot of interest in performing it around, but it was released by Pentatone recently, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous recording of that original. And then 3 Decembers is Opera San Jose, decided during the quarantine to do my opera. This is 3-character opera that I wrote based on a story by Terrence McNally with a libretto by Gene Shear that was originally written for Flicka. And they brought Susan Graham into the fold, and they staged it down at Opera San Jose, and they've been streaming it since the 3rd of December, 3 December, and they're still streaming it. It's been so successful. And then
it's
last night,
it's a chamber production, right? It's 2 p.m.
Oh yeah, they did it. It's the original piece has 3 singers and 11 instruments. This one, it's just with 2 pianos, but it works really, really well. In fact, after that, I made a permanent 2-piano version of it so that other places can do it because it didn't exist before that. But that was Corey Dastour's idea. Corey's the head of Opera San Jose. She's an old friend and she's really brilliant. She's very, very special, and she made that happen through sheer force of will. And then the other thing that's streaming now is HGO, once again, asked me to work with Margaret Atwood to create a cycle called Songs for Murdered Sisters for Joshua Hopkins. And that started streaming last night through HGO.
So hot off the presses.
Yeah.
That's great. And it's a song cycle, is it?
Yes, it's a cycle of 8 songs. Josh Hopkins' sister was murdered 5.5 years ago in Canada by a man who the same day murdered 2 other women, who all of whom had been ex-partners of his. And Josh he's a wonderful singer. He was actually Harry Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. And he's sung here several times. Great artist and good guy. And so he wanted to find a way to use not only his personal, but his professional voice to wake people up to this sort of domestic violence and gender-based violence. And so he asked me if I would work with him. And I said, yes, I would like to do that. And I said, but we need a female Canadian writer to take us there. And so we said, let's think big. And we asked Margaret Atwood, and we somehow got in touch with her. And over a period of months, she kept writing to us and saying, so I'm not saying that I'm doing it, but what about something like this? Or what about this? What about this? What about this? And finally, she delivered these 8 poems, like perfect. And it was amazing. And so I guess she said yes by delivering the project. And then I finished composing the songs about a year ago. And when we realized we weren't going to be able to premiere them in person, we decided to make a film. So I asked a local filmmaker named Jamie Niebuhr, who's married to a mezzo-soprano named Laura Crum, if he would do it, and he did a magnificent job. We filmed it at the 16th Street train station in Oakland, and it's quite beautiful, and it's emotionally very heavy and difficult, but it's also transformative and luminous, I think. And the magic of what he did with filming, I think, is extraordinary. So yeah, lots of projects, including Violins of Hope.
Yay. Hey, Lolly, do we have any questions there? Do we want to open it up to the audience for questions?
We have a few, and I just, in case you haven't been looking at the chat, everybody, I put a few links into the chat of where you can access some of these projects. So those are there. We have a question and a comment so far, and the question's from Melanie, and I'm just going to read it. I'd love to hear Jake speak about working with a librettist. He has had great relationships with so many terrific writers, Terrence McNally, Gene Shear, and now Margaret Atwood. Could he speak a bit about the process of working with them? Is it the same with each person, or does the process vary greatly depending on who it is?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Melanie. I think there's nothing more difficult than being an opera librettist. I mean, aside from being an opera singer, which I think is really, really hard. But I mean, a librettist has to have so many skills. It's not a play. It's not poetry. It's not a novel. It's not a short story. It's not, I think the closest thing I can think of to it is a screenplay, except that with a screenplay, you're counting on the camera to help tell the story. And in an opera with a libretto, you're counting on the music to do that. And so it's a very special writer who knows how to write very economically and have not only a sense of the stage, but also what it takes for opera singers to deliver a story, how movement on the opera stage is different than on for a play or a musical, and the different demands of that art form, and then a kind of poetry in the language so that it's words that can be sung, but that writing a text that demands music, so that not it just allows it, but demands it. It has to be a story and a libretto that does. And frankly, if a libretto works really well on its own, it's not a very good libretto. You know, that's why I find libretto readings to be a little impossible, because if you're doing a libretto reading, people who are listening are counting on getting all the information from the words, and that's not the point. You want to get information from the score, from the staging. So I need writing partners that are extremely flexible and are willing to make changes, because the music is going to change everything, and it's going to give us information that wasn't there to begin with. So, you know, we can think we have a really clear idea. We work back and forth for at least a year, developing a libretto, talking about characters, how they move, the threads of their journeys, where possible ensembles or solos or moments happen. And then I start writing music when I feel inspired, because that's another thing. A libretto isn't ready until it inspires music. And then as I'm letting the music start to lead, because that's what it has to do, things will change. Characters, you know, basic fundamental things about them might change. Their journey might change. Events might change. We might need to scrap whole things. Or I go back to the librettist and I say, you know what, this part of the phrase really works, this doesn't. And actually all of this we could do with a couple of stage movements. So it's a lot of back and forth, and the libretto really isn't done until the opera is done, because it's back and forth until then. And even after the premiere, there has to be room to rewrite from all sides.
So Jake, who gets the last say? The librettist or the composer?
Well, we have to agree. That's the thing. That's why I've really only worked with two librettists, Terence and Jean Shearer. And it's why historically you look and you see writing partners that find the right match and they stay with that person forever, because there's an unspoken communication. Whereas, you know, if you start fresh with someone, there's a whole new language to learn. And it's like having to fall in love again, you know? And frankly, I love working with Jean. I loved working with Terence. I don't want to fall in love again. You know? It's very gratifying. And also Gene challenges me and makes my work better. And I think I make his work better. So it's that mutual thing. But in terms of the final say, you know, with musically, I get the final say on all the music and the notes. He gets the final say on what the words are. But, you know, we have to both agree on these things. And also usually then a director and a conductor. There are four people who are essential at the beginning of any project: composer, librettist, director, conductor. And those people are going to be the sounding board, you know. So after Jean and I have done our work, people and get their reaction. I think of the whole process as the well. Every interesting project, whether it's a solo cello piece or a song cycle, or an opera, it comes from a well where it's an emotion, an event, a story that feels really deep and rich. So much so that it inspires me to want to go down in there and mine around and see how that feels and put something on the page. And it has to be the same way for the librettist. So that librettist will go down in the well and dig around and mine for whatever jewels and things. And then I go down and I change everything, because music changes everything. And then we work on that together. And then we present, you know, what we've written. And then the director and conductor, they go down in the well with our book and make observations. And then a singer and a, you know, production team, they're all going to take a trip to the well too. Those are the people I want to work with. Not to just take the book and regurgitate what's on the page, but have done their work and gone to see what that feels like, so that they're bringing something interesting to it too. Because I want to learn from all these people.
So do singers actually help you evolve the score, even at the very end?
Yes.
Really? Wow.
Absolutely. Their perspective to me is invaluable. That's why having these great colleagues that I write for all the time, like Sasha Cook, Joshua Hopkins, Susan Graham, Joyce DiDonato, Flicka. That's why I work a lot with the same people too, because they are trusted guides, just like my librettist, the director, Patrick Summers, you know, whoever I'm working with. It's really important to have friendly ears and hearts around you who will they will tell you the truth, but they will do it in a kind way because they want the project to succeed as well. So
Sure.
they're willing to go and then tell me, like, I love when singers will tell me, you know what, this doesn't really work for me, but if I approach the note from here or down here, that'll work better. So I'll give them an option. Unless I feel really strongly that it absolutely has to be that way, but I'm a collaborator. It's one of the things that I love the most about what I do is to collaborate and to learn. And that's what makes it exciting for me when I hear different ensembles, different directors, conductors, soloists take on pieces that I've written. One case that comes to mind is Dead Man Walking, which I thought I knew pretty well. And then I heard it in Tulsa, and it was the first time Michael Mays sang the role of Joseph Desrochers, the title role, Dead Man Walking. And it was like, I had never heard this piece before. It was like, I didn't know that role was possible to be sung that way and acted and performed that way. It was mind blowing. And that's what I live for, is another artist who's just going to take me and surprise me in another direction, which also means that the piece is strong because it's open to many different. If a piece can only be done one way because you've micromanaged it into like this horrible thing, then it's not going to be a very good piece. It's not going to last. It has to be able to breathe. It has to welcome many, many different ideas and perspectives.
Hey, Lolly, do we have any other questions? And if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. Are there any others here, Lolly?
There's a comment that I want to read because it's very sweet. And it's from Leslie. I saw Dead Man Walking here in St. Louis in 2011 at Union Avenue Opera, directed by Tim Osell. I said then, and I still say today, it was literally the most powerful piece of theater I've ever experienced in my entire life. I was so emotionally distraught by the first act. I considered leaving, but my friend talked me into staying. Thank God I stayed. I just thought that's really sweet. We have a question here. Did Songs for Murdered Sisters create unusual challenges given the very personal nature of the project for the singer?
Well, it was challenging, yes, for all of us, because how do you honor, his story, but not make it so personal that he's the only one who can do it and it shuts everyone out. That's why finding the right writer was so key, because we needed someone who could honor the source, but also make it specific and universal. And Margaret Atwood has lost a few friends to this kind of domestic violence. And so she wrote from her experience too. So, and also to be able to give Josh something where, because I don't believe in closure. I don't think there is closure, but I do think there is healing, there is transformation, and there is light that we can find. And so what Margaret did was she lit a match and she created light and possibility with these poems. And that opened a door for me. It was a very similar journey to writing Dead Man Walking, because of course, I haven't had a sibling or a loved one murdered, and I haven't had to deal with their murderer and the trial and all of that stuff. So what I have to do is what we all do as a composer is empathize, try to go into all the different characters, because I have to walk with every single character in every opera that I write, whether they're likable or not, and know them so well that I could take a walk on the beach with them outside of the opera. And
did the experience with your father inform that?
Oh, probably. That was one of the biggest events of my life. But empathy is a great part of what I think we do as artists, is not only to listen and empathize, but then translate that into something, again, that is specific and universal. People often ask me, what are the best stories for an opera? And I find intimate stories, large forces at work, So just a few people dealing with something huge. And that's true whether it's comedy or tragedy. The Barber of Seville and Sweeney Todd are essentially the same story,
Yes.
But the Barber of Seville found a comic way out of it, and Sweeney Todd is very dark and tragic. But, it's intimate story, large forces at work that seem to be beyond anyone's control. And those are the stories that I find work best for the stage. You can't have too many characters. You can have too many different stories going on at the same time. There has to be a sort of a central journey that has many tributaries.
So Lolly, I'm the timekeeper here. I
You are.
think maybe we have time for one more question.
Well, I have very briefly, there are two
Okay.
questions, but hopefully it's brief.
All right.
One is, I love so much of your leader, and listening to like Nick Pond sing your music is just, it's so incredibly personal and satisfying. I'm wondering if you're mostly concentrating on opera, but do you also continue to write leader? And my other question is just a reflection on how the pandemic has changed life for you. Are you just putting things on hold? Is it the same, or is your perspective different in terms of your work?
Okay, first thing. Okay, that's two big questions.
Sorry.
That's all right. Oh yes, I always write songs. I've just finished, I did songs for Murder Sisters and Intonations a year ago.
Available in the lobby.
It just makes a great gift. I just finished a new song cycle for Jamie Barton that is on texts that I asked 5 women to write for me last April, when we were in sort of a kind of a sweetly naive part of this whole journey of the past year, because all the stuff over the summer last year and the election and the riot had not happened yet. So now you look back at April and you think, God, what a blissful, sweet time, in a way, even though it was still tragic and dark. And so it has texts by Joyce DiDonato, Patti LuPone, Sister Helen Prejean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote a text for me, and Kathy Kelly, who's a wonderful pianist and conductor. And so that was supposed to be premiered in February, and it's now going to be premiered in May. And I wrote a short cello piece and some other songs, some more Dickinson. But I have to tell you, I always balance opera with songwriting, because I started off as a songwriter, and that's very, very important to me. So balancing opera and songs is important. I'd rather take on big projects. Big projects are much easier than little tiny ones, for me anyway. I'd rather immerse myself in a big project like an opera or a big song cycle, something like that, and really explore. I find smaller, shorter pieces actually more challenging. How has the pandemic changed things? Well, last year was interesting. In March and April, I was really writing like a demon, because suddenly I wasn't traveling, I wasn't teaching, I wasn't moving around, I was home. I don't know if you remember, spring was gorgeous last year. There were beautiful flowers and blooming things everywhere. So I felt really inspired. And then late May, we started realizing this is going to be a while, and the seasons in the summer and the fall shut down. And then we all knew spring was going to be gone. And so there was this massive uncertainty. And like I said, my studio, I'm used to a kind of a blissful uncertainty, but when there's uncertainty everywhere, I'd never really negotiated that. And so I've been writing this huge new opera called Intelligence about women spies in the South during the Civil War. And I had been working on it. And suddenly June, July, and August, and part of September, I couldn't write anything. I tried really hard. I showed up every day in my studio. It was like the Ernest Hemingway line. Writing is easy. I just sit in front of the typewriter until blood gushes out of my forehead. That's sort of what it felt like. But then, in late August, I sort of realized this uncertainty is not going away. So you can either push and resist and try to force it away, or you can learn to lean into it and realize this is my reality. This is the reality now. And so I think when I did that and I stopped fighting all the time, music opened up and it started writing. So I finished the first act of this opera, which we're workshopping next week. We're having a reading of at Opera San Jose, thanks to Corey Dastour, and with an amazing cast, amazing locals. Gosh, we have so many great local singers. And then I started writing songs, and then some solo works, and then these other song cycles. So and now I feel like I'm writing very fluidly again. Also, because there are adults in the White House, that helps. I mean, I don't want to jump into politics, but I have to tell you, I'm sure you all can relate. There's like, suddenly I don't wake up like every morning dreading what's going to pop up on my phone. I don't feel that level of existential dread every single day. I think that has been very, very helpful. I think that, and also leaning into the uncertainty and saying, this is just, it is uncertain. So let's be creative within the uncertainty, which is what I think everybody has been striving to do. But I think walking, staying connected, showing up for work, trying to develop inspiring projects with colleagues that I adore, these have been lifelines through the whole thing. So I'm
Jake,
grateful to be here with you today, actually.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. I love that line, being creative through the uncertainty. I think that is a mantra for how we can live our lives. Even when we come back to normalcy, whatever that is,
Yeah.
things are uncertain. So I personally want to thank you, Jake, for doing this, and our audience, because it was illuminating. I don't know. I just, felt like I have an idea of behind the scenes, pulling back the curtain, taking a look at, a very important musical figure in our midst. So thank you very much. Lolly and the Amateur Music Network, you guys are great. I love supporting you. I'm on their advisory board, I think, or something. I don't know.
Yes, you are, David.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but I do want to make a plug. So we're going to be doing some more of these conversations. One of my next ones, Jake, you might be interested in, is my pal and Broadway star, Karen Mason.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
And I see Ron Gallman here. Ron.
Hi, Ron.
Karen Mason at what was it called? It was that club in Chicago where they had a show at 11, 1, and 3 a.m. So Karen Mason
that's Ron's time of day.
That is his time of day. Anyway, that's April 17th. If you want to join us, please support the Amateur Music Network, because you know what? We have to support our musicians and our artists during the pandemic and always. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Really great to see all these smiling faces.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Great
Thank
to
you,
be with
David.
you.
Thank
I can't
Let's
wait to
stay
be back in the
connected.
room with you all.
Definitely.
In the
It'll
room
be
where it
soon.
happens.
Right.
All right,
Bye-bye.
guys. See you
Bye-bye.
later.
Everyone.
Bye now.